Hollow Knight is a platform-heavy Metroidvania about some little entity made out of void, attempting to kill everything in its way to bring down 3 dreamers, to break open a seal, to a temple, to defeat another void entity that failed to contain an infection that spread throughout the city of Hallownest. The game is renowned for its difficulty, its world building, and its platforming. As a knight, you unlock various items to help navigate the empty world. You start off with a sword-like object called a nail, which is wielded in one hand. After spending nearly hundreds of hours in this game, I had the thought of wondering if I, just like the knight, could beat the game with one hand. And so I asked, can I beat Hollow Knight using one hand? Before I begin talking and showing off the run, I just wanted to lay down a couple of ground rules that I set for myself. The first was that the attempt had to be performed on a controller, as using a keyboard would make the challenge pretty trivial. The second was that I was allowed to remap the buttons to make it a bit more bearable for my pinky finger, which would be doing most of the actions. The third rule was to have fun and be yourself. Dropping out of King's Pass and finding my way into Dirtmouth, I encountered Elderbug, who I promptly ignored because he spits on children and throws small stones at geese. I'd much rather not associate with someone like that. Descending into the vast underground world of Hallownest, I went left and fell down a long room hitting what I'm convinced was every single enemy on the way. Thankfully I knew the area like the back of my hand, and getting to the first boss of the game was a breeze. Taking down the False Knight was easy. I dodged every single hit he aimed at me except for the ones that did hit me. The knight then dropped the city crest, which allowed me entry into the City of Tears that unlocks later on in the game. I proceeded on to meet with a snail shaman, who gave me my first spell, which shoots a force of energy out of the knight. He then knocked me unconscious and placed me into his definitely not a sex dungeon. But after killing every single one of the shaman's pets, he was so emotionally distraught that he released me and I was able to carry on my way to Greenpath to take on my next enemy. After killing a boulder that blocked the entryway to Greenpath, I experienced some secondhand embarrassment while editing this for my disgraceful platforming. I mean, all I had to do was jump, and there I go falling into the apple juice so many times. After such a stunning series of fails, I wanted to wash my hand of it and show my chat just how to beat Hornet with an impressive show of skill. Unfortunately I didn't do that and she killed me so many times, but ultimately I did manage to defeat her and delay the release of Silksong by another week in the process. You're welcome. After unlocking the dash ability from Hornet, I had to retrace my footsteps all the way back to near the False Knight to release our homeboy Sly from the enchanting nature of the Radiance and get the only charm needed for the run, which upgrades my spell damage. Between these two objectives, however, was the Gruzmother, one of the prime MILFs of the game. She was easy to take down single-handedly, along with all her disgusting children that burst from her abdomen. After talking to Sly, he opened his shop above ground, which will allow me to purchase the lamp from him later on. I purchased the Shaman Stone from Salubra, arguably the most huggable bug in the entire game, and proceeded to the Fungal Waste to get the Mantis Claw and a whole bunch of Geo, the game's currency. Navigating through the Fungal Waste was a bad time for Chemical Packer. I had a hand in some self-sabotage by forgetting to rest at a bench halfway through the wastes, and died to one extremely aggressive Mantis. Then after obtaining the claw, which allows me to cling to walls, I encountered hands down some of the worst platforming of the entire run. Having to jump, alternate between left and right movements, and dash using my limited dexterous ability led to me having my hand very full. Getting overwhelmed by the amount of mantises. Manti? Massachusetts? I don't know what the plural of that word is. Anyway, it led to an unforgettable experience, but finally I managed to take out the Mantis one by one and make my way to fight arguably the best boss in the game. Now I love the Mantis lords so much and I've fought them so many times, I was confident I could do this battle with my hand tied behind my back. So I kinda did. After a couple of deaths, I managed to defeat all 3 of the lords and unlock the option to go to Deepness, which I didn't take because I'm not a sadist. Instead, I returned back up to the previous area, obtained a hefty amount of Geo, a new charm, and an item that I can sell later for even more Geo. Feeling very proud of myself despite having only been in the easiest portion of the game, I made my way to the City of Tears, which I could unlock thanks to the crest I obtained from the False Knight earlier. Here I upgraded my nail so it did a touch more damage, sold some stuff to Lem, so I'd be able to afford to unlock some stag stations later on, and of course the lamp. After this, I decided to try my hand at the Soul Sanctum, which I needed in order to unlock the Desolate Dive spell, whose upgraded form would be my main source of damage against the harder bosses later on in the game. After slaughtering some innocent blobfish and destroying some nerd with a sword, I found the glorious Soulmaster. This was the boss that I feared that could bring me down, not just because of its difficulty, but because this thing didn't use any hands at all. That's right, this badass didn't even need hands to put up a fight, but unfortunately for him and fortunately for me, I still had a hand, and I took him down with ease, unlocking that crucial spell. Making my way out of the Soul Sanctum, the game forced my hand, and I had to face my fears of entering one of the worst areas in the casual experience. Crystal Peak is hands down one of the most tedious areas of the game. with some annoying platform thanks to the big crushy pillars all around the place, a slightly annoying boss that's pretty fast and blocks a bench which acts as the checkpoint in the game. And there are these smug little bastards that shoot spikes that expand into sharp balls when they hit a solid object. These crystal hunters constantly catch me off guard so often with how infrequently they shoot their little spiky pellets at me that I often feel like I'll lose my mind fighting them. Anyway, I made my way to the Crystal Guardian and made short work of it, giving me a crucial checkpoint to rest at for the difficult portions of this area. Here I had to perform some relatively easy platforming to obtain the Crystal Dash, which is crucial for getting into certain places later on, and just travelling through areas a little bit faster than spamming dash. Descending further down into Crystal Peak, I had one more objective to accomplish in here before I could leave this godforsaken hellhole. Guided by some tricky platforming and several crystal hunters was the upgraded spell of our Desolate Dive ability known as Descending Dark. This beautiful spell not only packs a tremendous punch, but also provides some invincibility frames that prevent damage being taken during the casting of the spell. Good news for me, bad news for everyone else. Sadly, the path to getting to this spell was filled with toil and frustration. Dying several times to the stinky hunters, I was then met with a new enemy I had to deal with on top of all the platforming. Returning to where I died previously, I was met with a shade of myself that will float towards me and use my own attacks and spells against me. After far too long, I did succeed in navigating around this treacherous path, killing the shade, and managing to absorb the brand new spell. The area just outside of where I got Descending Dark held a shortcut to fall into an area that held some super duper important lore that I definitely absolutely paid attention to. After waking up from whatever all that stuff was about, I found someone had dropped their dream nail on the floor. Idiot. I took that nail for myself, which was lucky because I actually needed it to take down the 3 dreamers that I mentioned at the start. With the dream nail in hand, ready to take on the world, I landed in a world of shit. Literally. I had to take on a guy whose whole mantra was poop. This guy lived, breathed, and I'm guessing ate poop, much like most of the JoJo's Bizarre Adventure fandom. Washing my hand of the shitty boss, I hit some valve which probably did something useful, and navigated deeper into the royal waterways to make a tree cry and give me the ability to swim in the apple juice without getting hurt. I now had every single ability that I needed to beat the game pretty comfortably. Sure, I could probably go upgrade health or mana or increase my nail damage, but I own an RGB keyboard and am therefore above any of that, so I set off to dispose of the first streamer, arguably the biggest pain in the ass. Monomon, the first streamer, is protected by a huge jellyfish known as Umu. This great
supine protoplasmic invertebrate jellies
is so incredibly tedious as a boss, as you cannot directly damage it, first without Krill attacking it. Second, the window of opportunity to hit Umu during the time it's vulnerable are so short that you'll likely miss a whole bunch of times to attack. And finally, sometimes you can hit this boss in a way that it floats out of bounds and you have to wait for it to float back in again. I hate Umu. Speedrunners hate Umu. I'm fairly sure Umu's parents hate Umu, the name sounded like Homer Simpson's maternity dress. Anyway, after many failed attempts, I managed to kill Umu. I then forced Krill to watch as I destroyed his mentor and moved on without a moment's hesitation. Up next was the easiest streamer of the 3, Hera. The difficult part of dispatching of Hera is actually getting to her. This dozing spider is tucked away in Deep Nest with very few ways to easily access her. Navigating through Deep Nest is a pain with enemies appearing out of thin air, spikes made out of crawling bugs, and these Edward Scissorhands wannabes that do double damage to us. I did finally reach Hera's area after nearly falling all the way back down to the depths of Deep Nest and having to do the loop again. But I did make it and I got to sit on a cozy little bench that wasn't a trap at all. After falling for the bench that was clearly a trap, I was gently stirred awake by a guy named Rayloft. Suddenly everything was 3-dimensional. From there I survived an execution, encountered a dragon, watched the city burn to the ground. I was then tasked to dispose of a second dragon, absorbed its abilities, found out I was something called the Dragonborn. I met with some cool priests who taught me how to shout, went back in time or some dumb shit, and then I killed some lame dragon called Alduin and returned back to Deep Nest and slayed Hera on top of it all. The final dreamer was all that stood between me and the Hollow Knight. Lurian is tucked away in the City of Tears, guarded by her faithful knights. After ascending the tower, I entered a secret area, destroyed a chandelier so Seer could no longer sing that damn song, and killed one of the 6 Watcher Knights before even beginning the fight. I've got to hand it to the knights, they put up a real big challenge, but thanks to my iron hand, I made short work of them, dying only a handful of times to them before getting access to Lurian. But with blood on my hand, and Lurian disposed of, I was allowed to face the final challenge of this run. The Tomb of the Hollow, known as the Black Egg Temple, was unlocked, and I was able to gain entry. Returning to Hallownest, ignoring Elderbug one final time, recounting all the times he urinated on people's Amazon packages and shook hibernating squirrels out of trees, I took the elevator down to where the final boss resided and entered the temple. On entering this temple, I felt extremely intimidated as I looked above me to see the Hollow Knight staring back at me. I then destroyed the chains that kept him contained, and after breaking the final shackle, he dropped down and screamed. He was ready. I was not. This boss was fast, agile, and he kept doing these really annoying jumps landing where I was trying to go without even attacking me. It took me so many attempts to resist damage tanking this thing before I took it more slow and methodical. I started reacting to his every move in the final showdown, moving away, getting swings in the few windows of opportunity I had. After several minutes of beating this knight down, the second phase began, where the Hollow Knight now started to spit out what I can only assume was the pulp of the orange juice he had consumed. Failing to dodge nearly every single piece of pulp that he shot at me, I was still ready as he slammed into the ground repeatedly, and I was able to get enough hits in until finally, he was too weak to continue, and I took my final slash in. The Hollow Knight was defeated, and as a reward, I got to drink all the orange juice he had and finish the game. And with that, I showed that I could beat Hollow Knight single-handedly. I did it! One-handed! Oh! Oh my god. One-handed. I just beat Hollow Knight one-handed.